2:41 a.m. I jolted awake in a feverish haze, sweat soaking through my sheets, my phone shrieking against my ear. I'd been burning up for 3 days straight. Antibiotics sitting useless on my nightstand, as worthless as the trust I'd once placed in my boss. "You're fired." Her voice cut through like frozen steel. "Your projects and office have been reassigned. Goodbye." If you've ever been betrayed at your weakest moment, sit down. I'm about to tell you how I turned those words into the final bullet that ended her career. My name is Nora Layton. And at 34, I thought I'd finally found my place in the world. After years buried in sterile research labs, surrounded by petri dishes and microscopes, I'd made the leap to Cryonics Systems, a cutting-edge biotech company in Seattle that promised to bring science to life. God, how naive I was to believe corporate taglines. I wasn't just another cog in the machine. I was a product development specialist with a gift for turning abstract biological concepts into tangible, marketable innovations. My colleagues used to joke that I could make DNA sequencing sexy enough to sell at Nordstrom. That talent is what caught Margot Vellner's attention. Margot. Even now, writing her name makes my jaw clench. She was everything you'd expect from a Fortune 500 CEO, sharp cheekbones, Armani suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a smile that could charm investors out of millions while simultaneously making employees feel like they should be grateful for the privilege of her presence. When she personally recruited me from the Hutchinson Research Institute, I felt chosen. Special. "You're exactly what Cryonics needs," she'd said over imported champagne at her waterfront office. "Someone who understands both the science and the vision. I want to give you complete creative freedom. Build something revolutionary. And I'll make sure you're rewarded accordingly." The R&D director position dangled before me like a golden carrot. She knew about my father's rare neurological condition. Knew I needed the comprehensive health insurance only a company like Cryonics could provide. She used that knowledge like a scalpel, precise and devastating. For 2 years, I poured everything into that company. 18-hour days became my norm. I developed 3 breakthrough prototypes that secured $47 million in Series C funding. My bioresponsive polymer design won industry awards. The neural interface mapping system I created had venture capitalists fighting each other for a piece of Cryonics' future. But here's what they don't tell you in those inspiring LinkedIn posts about grinding and hustling. Sometimes your biggest achievements become someone else's stepping stones. Every breakthrough I delivered, Margot absorbed into her narrative. She had this way of presenting my work that made it sound like she'd been in the lab herself, pipette in hand, discovering the future of biotechnology. At first, I told myself it was just corporate politics. This was how the game was played. My name was still on the patents, after all. My team knew the truth. But recognition is a funny thing. It's not just about credit, it's about power. And every time Margot stood on stage announcing our latest innovation while I sat in the audience, she was slowly, methodically, stripping mine away. The warning signs were there. During the Q3 presentation to the board, she introduced my adaptive cell cultivation system as an initiative I've been personally overseeing. When TechCrunch wanted to interview the mind behind our revolutionary protein synthesis method, she redirected them to discuss the collaborative nature of innovation at Cryonics. My own assistant started scheduling my meetings through Margot's office. "You need to watch your back." Jake from legal warned me one night as we worked late on patent filings. "She's done this before." But I couldn't leave, not with unvested equity worth $2 million, not with my father's treatment costing $8,000 a month, not when everything I'd worked for was so close to fruition. So I stayed, and I planned, and I began to document everything, every email, every message, every casual conversation where she'd take credit for my ideas. I started building something else alongside my official projects, an insurance policy made of timestamps, recordings, and irrefutable proof. Because if there's one thing I learned in all those years of research, it's that data doesn't lie. People do. The transformation happened gradually, like watching cancer cells multiply under a microscope, Slow at first, then suddenly overwhelming. Margot's theft of my work evolved from subtle omissions to blatant appropriation. The Global Innovation Summit in San Francisco should have been my moment. I'd spent 6 months perfecting the presentation for our revolutionary biosensor technology, the kind of breakthrough that appears once in a decade. The conference organizers had specifically requested the lead developer present the findings. That was me. The invitation had my name on it. 2 days before the summit. Margot called me into her office. "I'll be handling the presentation personally," she announced, scrolling through her phone without even looking up. "The board feels it needs an executive touch. You'll attend, of course, third row, with the rest of the team." Third row. I'd birthed this technology from nothing, nursed it through countless failures, and now I'd watch from the third row while she basked in 20,000 watts of stage lights and industry applause. "The slides need adjustment," she added. "Remove the technical deep dives. Add more vision statements. Make it feel more CEO appropriate." I spent that night in my apartment, staring at my laptop screen, systematically erasing my fingerprints from my own masterpiece. Each deleted slide felt like cutting away pieces of myself, but I did it. I polished her theft until it gleamed. The summit was worse than I'd imagined. Margot strutted across that stage in her $5,000 Saint Laurent heels, gesturing at my diagrams, explaining my innovations with just enough technical inaccuracy to make my skin crawl. When the audience erupted in applause, she actually teared up, talking about the long nights she'd spent pursuing this vision. The only long nights she'd spent were at charity galas and investor dinners. "Brilliant presentation," the CEO of Genentech told her afterward at the reception. I stood 10 feet away, invisible, holding a lukewarm glass of champagne that tasted like battery acid. "You should be proud," my colleague Sandra whispered. "At least the work is getting recognition." But that was the thing. It wasn't just about recognition anymore. It was about erasure. Margot wasn't just stealing credit. She was rewriting history, creating a narrative where I'd never existed at all. The isolation campaign started the following month. My weekly one-on-ones with her were canceled due to scheduling conflicts. My requests for additional resources were ignored. Emails went unanswered for days, then weeks. When I finally cornered her after a board meeting, she smiled that razor-sharp smile. "You seem stressed, Nora. Perhaps you're taking on too much. We should discuss redistributing some of your responsibilities." "My performance reviews have been exceptional," I reminded her. "Performance isn't just about individual achievement," she replied, her voice dripping with false concern. "It's about fitting into the company culture, being a team player." Team player. Code for, "Shut up and let me steal your work." She assigned me impossible deadlines: develop a new prototype in 3 weeks that should take 3 months, create comprehensive reports with 12 hours notice, attend simultaneous meetings on opposite ends of the campus. When I missed anything, she documented it meticulously. "I'm worried about your commitment to excellence," she wrote in an email, CCing HR. "These inconsistencies are concerning." My vacation requests were denied. "Critical project phase," she'd say, even during the slowest quarters. My conference attendances were canceled. Budget constraints, while she flew first class to every industry event, presenting my work as her own. The other executives started avoiding me. Lunch invitations dried up. My name disappeared from important email chains. I'd become organizational poison, marked by her disapproval. "Why don't you just quit?" my father asked during one of his treatment sessions, watching me answer emails with shaking hands. "Because then she wins," I said. "And because we need this insurance." But it was more than that. I'd started to understand her game. This wasn't just about stealing credit. It was about breaking me down until I either quit or gave her grounds for termination. Either way, she'd get my innovations, my patents, my everything, without the inconvenience of my presence. "You're playing with fire," Jake warned me again. "I've seen her destroy careers. Good people, smart people, like you." "Then maybe it's time someone played back," I said. That night, I went home and opened a new encrypted folder on my personal laptop. I labeled it Insurance. Inside, I began building my case, piece by piece, every stolen idea, every gaslit conversation, every documented lie. If Margot wanted to erase me, I'd make sure I left a mark she couldn't remove. The art of corporate warfare isn't about brute force, it's about precision. While Margot played her power games above board, I began my work in the shadows. My first move was subtle. In every piece of code I wrote, every formula I developed, I embedded digital watermarks, invisible signatures that would prove authorship if examined by someone who knew where to look. Not obvious enough to trigger suspicion, but legally bulletproof if needed. Comments in the code using specific syntax patterns only I employed. Algorithmic quirks that were uniquely mine, like a pianist's distinctive touch on certain keys. The biosensor software I developed contained what I called archaeological layers, development histories that couldn't be erased without breaking the entire system. Each iteration contained timestamp markers linked to my personal development logs, stored on servers Margot didn't even know existed. Then came the documentation phase. Washington is a two-party consent state for recording, but there's no law against taking meticulous notes. After every meeting, I'd return to my desk and write detailed summaries, emailing them to myself at my personal address with read receipts enabled. As per our discussion today at 2:47 p.m. regarding the neural mapping project. These emails became my paper trail, each one a breadcrumb leading back to the truth. The real goldmine came during our walking meetings, Margot's preferred way to give controversial directives without leaving evidence. She didn't know about the smartwatch I wore, tracking not just my steps, but my location with GPS timestamps. When she'd later deny conversations, I'd have proof we were together at the exact time and place. I started cultivating relationships outside Margot's sphere of influence. Dr. Harrison Webb, a board member who'd always shown interest in the technical aspects of our work, became a regular coffee companion. Fascinating developments in your lab, he'd say, and I'd share just enough to pique his interest, always careful to frame it as the work I'm leading rather than attacking Margot directly. The venture capitalists were trickier. They worshipped at Margot's altar, but they loved innovation more. During investor lab tours, I made sure to be the one explaining the technical details, answering the hard questions Margot couldn't. Nora's our technical genius, she'd say with that patronizing smile, not realizing she was establishing my expertise in front of the people who mattered. Then I discovered her mistake, the one that would become my weapon. While reviewing patent filings, I noticed discrepancies. Margot had been editing technical specifications after my submissions, removing safety warnings and limitations to make the products seem more market-ready than they were. She thought she was streamlining, but she was actually introducing liability issues that could destroy the company. I documented everything: original versions versus her edits, safety protocols she'd deleted, risk assessments she'd buried, all saved in multiple locations, cloud servers, encrypted drives, even physical printouts in a safety deposit box across town. My masterpiece was the email chain from February. Margot had explicitly instructed me to ignore FDA preliminary concerns about our cell cultivation system. Handle it quietly, she'd written. We can't afford delays before the Series D funding closes. I'd responded with my concerns, professionally outlined, legally bulletproof. Her reply, I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm giving you a direct order. Proceed as instructed or find another job. I proceeded as instructed, but I also filed a formal concern with our internal compliance system, using a form I knew would be archived permanently in legal records she couldn't access. The paranoia was getting to her. She started asking IT to monitor my email, but I'd anticipated that. My real work happened on a laptop that never touched the company network, using a VPN that routed through 3 different countries. You've been distracted lately, she said during one of our rare face-to-faces. Your commitment seems divided. I'm fully committed to the success of our projects, I replied, emphasizing the hour just enough to watch her eye twitch. She started making mistakes, claiming credit for work in meetings where I'd kept minutes, presenting technical specifications she didn't understand to people who did. The head of engineering pulled me aside after one particularly embarrassing presentation where she'd confused RNA transcription with DNA replication. Is she always this creative with the science? He asked. I couldn't say. I replied carefully. I just focus on getting the actual work done. Seeds of doubt, planted carefully, watered with facts, growing in the dark. By September, I had 16 gigabytes of evidence. Enough to bury her career several times over. But I needed one more thing, a trigger. Something that would make my retaliation look like justice, not revenge. I didn't know it yet. But Margot was about to hand it to me herself. The Seattle winter hit hard that year. December brought a respiratory outbreak that swept through the office like wildfire, taking down half our staff. I'd been pulling 20-hour days trying to meet Margot's impossible deadline for the quarterly board presentation, my immune system running on fumes and stubbornness. The fever started on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, I couldn't keep water down. Thursday, I was hallucinating that the patterns on my bedroom ceiling were molecular structures rearranging themselves into accusations. My temperature hit 103.8 degrees Celsius. I managed to send an email to HR and Margot. Severe flu. Doctor ordered minimum 3 days rest. All urgent files accessible on shared drive. Will respond when able. Margot's response came within minutes. Unacceptable timing. Board presentation Monday. Figure it out. I couldn't figure out my own name at that point, let alone complex biotech presentations. The antibiotics my doctor prescribed sat useless on my nightstand. Viral infections don't respond to antibiotics. But try explaining that to a body that's consuming itself from the inside out. Friday passed in a haze. Saturday, I missed 4 calls from unknown numbers. Sunday, my assistant Emma texted, Margot's looking for you. She seems furious. What's happening? I tried to respond, but my fingers wouldn't cooperate with my brain. The words kept swimming away like fish in murky water. Then came that call. 2:41 a.m., Monday morning. The phone's ring cut through my fever dreams like a rusty blade. I fumbled for it, knocking over a glass of water that had been sitting there for who knows how long. Hello? My voice came out like gravel in a blender. Finally. Margot's voice was arctic. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? I'm sick. You're fired. The words landed like ice water on burned skin. Effective immediately. Your projects have been reassigned to the technical team. Your office has been cleared. Your access has been revoked. I tried to sit up, the room spinning violently. You can't. I have documentation. The employment law. You abandoned your position during a critical period. That's grounds for immediate termination. Your final check will be mailed. Your personal items will be in a box at reception. Don't come to the office. Security has your photo. My father's insurance. Cobra information will be sent, though I doubt you can afford it without a job. I could hear the smile in her voice. You should have been a team player. Nora. Goodbye. The line went dead. I lay there in the dark, fever sweat turning cold against my skin, the phone still pressed to my ear as if the dial tone might suddenly apologize and take it all back. My laptop sat closed on my desk. All my access to company systems now severed. 6 years of my life. Deleted with a phone call at 2:41 a.m. The rage came slowly, building beneath the fever like magma under stone. She'd waited until I was at my weakest, unable to fight back, unable to even stand. She'd taken everything, my work, my reputation, my father's health care, while I lay here drowning in my own burning body. But here's what Margot didn't understand about people who work in laboratories. We're patient. We understand that some reactions require precise conditions. Some experiments need time to develop. And sometimes, the most devastating results come from the quietest processes. I forced myself to reach for my personal laptop, the one that never touched Cryonix's network. My fingers shook as I opened the encrypted folder labeled Insurance. 16 gigabytes of evidence glowed on the screen like a promise. Through the fever haze, I smiled for the first time in days. It probably looked deranged. Lips cracked, eyes bloodshot, hair matted with 3 days of sick sweat. But in that moment, I felt something better than healthy. I felt inevitable. "You should have checked the employment law yourself, Margot," I whispered to the empty room. "Terminating an employee on medical leave with documented illness, that's not just grounds for wrongful termination. That's grounds for war." I closed the laptop and let myself sink back into the fever. I needed to get better first. Revenge, like all good science, requires a clear mind and steady hands. But as I drifted back into unconsciousness, one thought crystallized through the delirium. Margot had just made the biggest mistake of her career. She turned a brilliant scientist with everything to lose into one with nothing left to fear. And in my experience, that's how the most dangerous experiments begin. Recovery took 10 days. 10 days of antibiotics, soup, and meticulous planning. By day 11, I was ready to dismantle everything Margot had built on the foundation of my stolen work. My first call was to Richardson and Associates, the employment law firm that companies fear most in Seattle. Patricia Richardson herself took my case after reviewing the evidence for 30 minutes. "This is one of the most egregious cases of wrongful termination I've seen," she said, adjusting her glasses. "But that's just the appetizer, isn't it?" The main course was fraud, intellectual property theft, safety violations, securities fraud if we could prove she'd misled investors about the true source of innovations. Patricia's eyes lit up like a prosecutor who just found the smoking gun, the bloody knife, and a written confession all in the same evidence bag. While Patricia built the legal case, I activated Phase 2. The National Product Safety and Ethics Commission received an anonymous package containing documentation of every safety protocol Margot had overridden, every warning she'd deleted, every risk assessment she'd buried. The biotechnology they were rushing to market, my technology, with her lethal modifications, had a 23% failure rate in extended trials. She'd hidden that data from everyone. The NPSCC doesn't play games. Within 48 hours, they'd launched a formal investigation. But I wasn't done, not even close. Dr. Harrison Webb received a different package at his private office. Not anonymous this time. I wanted him to know exactly who was pulling back the curtain. Inside, emails, development logs, side-by-side comparisons of my original patents and Margot's refinements. And a particularly damning video from the company's internal security system showing me working alone in the lab at 3 a.m. on the breakthrough she'd claimed as her own vision. "My God," he said when he called me that evening. "We need to discuss this with the board immediately." "No," I said calmly. "First, you need to check what's actually being shipped to consumers. Check it against my original specifications, not Margot's versions." The venture capital firms were trickier. They had millions invested in Margot's leadership, but they had more to lose if the company imploded from scandal. I sent them a simple email from my personal account. "Before your next funding round, you might want to review the attached documentation regarding product liability and intellectual property concerns at Cryonics. I've included the NPSCC investigation reference number for your convenience." The tech journalists were the most fun. I'd built relationships with several over the years, feeding them accurate information when Margot sent them fluff. Now, I gave them something better than a story. I gave them a scandal with receipts. Deep background, Cryonix's hidden crisis, read the subject line. Every journalist knows deep background means information they can use but can't attribute. They also know it's usually gold, within a week. TechCrunch ran a piece about troubling questions surrounding Cryonix's latest product safety. The information published an investigation into unusual patterns in patent attributions. GeekWire asked why the company's star developer had suddenly disappeared during a critical product launch. Margot tried to control the narrative. She sent a company-wide email about disgruntled former employees spreading misinformation. She held an all-hands meeting about staying focused despite external noise. She even hired a PR crisis firm. But you can't PR your way out of an NPSCC investigation. You can't spin your way past documented fraud, and you definitely can't massage the truth when your star witness has receipts for everything. The board called an emergency meeting for the following Monday. Harrison leaked me the agenda. Discussion of CEO performance and product safety concerns. I waited until Sunday night to play my final card. I sent Margot a single email. I'll be attending tomorrow's board meeting as a witness. I thought you should know I've recovered fully from my illness. Looking forward to discussing our work, specifically, who actually did it. P.S. You were right about one thing. I should have been more of a team player. Too bad you never realized I was the entire team. And her response came at 1:17 a.m. One line. What do you want? I didn't reply. She'd find out tomorrow that what I wanted wasn't something she could give. What I wanted was something I was going to take. Everything she'd built on the foundation of my work, crumbling into dust while she watched. The fever was gone, but I still didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, reviewing my evidence one final time. 16 gigabytes had grown to 32. Every document triple verified. Every claim supported by evidence that would hold up in court. Tomorrow, Margot would learn what happens when you fire a scientist at 2:41 a.m. She'd learn that the smallest organisms, viruses, bacteria, terminated employees, are often the most dangerous. She'd learn that I hadn't just been taking notes. I'd been taking inventory of everything I was going to destroy. The cryonics boardroom hadn't been renovated since the company's founding, all glass and chrome, designed to intimidate. I'd only been inside twice before, both times as Margot's silent shadow. Today, I walked in as the main event. 12 board members sat around the obsidian conference table. Margot was at the head, her usual armor of Armani intact. But I could see the cracks, foundation slightly too heavy, concealing sleepless nights. Her hands gripped her Mont Blanc pen like a weapon. This is highly irregular, she started as I took my seat. This woman was terminated for cause. She shouldn't be. Ms. Vellner. Harrison Webb interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen the evidence. The board has requested Ms. Layton's testimony. Please let her speak. I opened my laptop, connected it to the presentation system, and pulled up my first slide, a photo of the original biosensor prototype, date-stamped, with my reflection visible in the glass casing. Board members, what I'm about to show you isn't just about stolen credit. It's about a pattern of deception that has put this company, your investments, and thousands of consumers at risk. The room went silent. Slide 2. The original patent application, my name as sole inventor, dated 6 months before Margot claimed to have conceived the idea. Slide 3. Email from Margot, explicitly instructing me to remove safety warnings from FDA submissions. Slide 4. The actual failure rates from trials, 23%, versus the 2% reported to investors. These are fabrications, Margot interjected, her voice rising. Disgruntled employee tactics. Then let's look at something that can't be fabricated, I said, clicking to the next slide. Security footage, time-stamped, showing me alone in the lab at 3:47 a.m., running the experiment that would become my breakthrough. Ms. Vellner, where were you at 3:47 a.m. on March 15th? I don't have to answer. You were in Cabo, I continued, posting Instagram photos from a venture capital retreat. Yet somehow, you claim to have personally conducted this experiment. The board members shifted uncomfortably. One was typing furiously on his phone, probably checking her Instagram history. I moved through the evidence methodically. Each slide was a nail in the coffin she'd built for herself. Development logs showing her refinements were actually dangerous shortcuts. Emails where she took credit for work while I was literally in surgery for appendicitis. The smoking gun, her own voice, recorded during a walking meeting, telling me to bury the negative data until after the IPO. You recorded me without consent? Margot's face had gone from pale to fury red. I recorded my own voice notes after our meetings, I corrected. You happened to be speaking in the background. Amazing how voices carry in that courtyard you love for private conversations. Dr. Webb pulled up a tablet. Ms. Vellner. The NPSEC investigation. Were you aware they'd issued a preliminary recall recommendation? Margot's pen snapped in her hand. Black ink spread across her palm like blood. Furthermore, Harrison continued, our legal team has informed us that Ms. Layton's wrongful termination suit includes potential criminal charges, intellectual property theft, securities fraud, and, he paused for effect, conspiracy to endanger public health. This is ridiculous. Margot stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I built this company. I secured the funding. You built it on my work, I said quietly. Every innovation you pitched, every breakthrough you celebrated, every technical achievement that made cryonics valuable, I created them. And I can prove it. Final slide, a comparison chart. Every major innovation, with documented proof of my authorship versus Margot's claims. The board could see it all laid out, years of systematic theft. We need to discuss this privately, the lead board member said. Ms. Layton, thank you for your testimony. Ms. Vellner, please remain. As I packed my laptop, Margot grabbed my arm. You've destroyed everything, she hissed. I looked at her hand on my arm, the same hand covered in ink from her broken pen, and smiled. No. Margot. I revealed everything. You destroyed it all by yourself the moment you called me at 2:41 a.m. I walked out of that boardroom knowing I'd never enter it again, but I also knew Margot wouldn't be leaving it as CEO. 2 hours later, Harrison called. The board has voted, Margot's been terminated, effective immediately. We'd like to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer, with full restoration of your equity and a substantial settlement for the wrongful termination. The offer was everything I'd wanted 6 months ago. Now, it felt like trying to wear clothes that no longer fit. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I have other plans. The settlement check from Cryonics cleared 3 weeks later, enough to fund a startup twice over. But I wasn't interested in their money or their C-suite office with its view of Elliott Bay. I had something more valuable, a vision they'd never understood, and talent they'd never truly appreciated. You're insane to walk away, my lawyer Patricia said, reviewing my rejection of their CTO offer. Full equity restoration, 300,000 base, and a seat on the board. Most people would kill for this. Most people haven't been killed by it, I replied, signing the papers that formally declined their offer. I don't want to fix what's already rotten. I want to build something better. Lattice Labs Incorporated a month later. Not in some gleaming Seattle high-rise, but in a converted warehouse in Georgetown. All exposed brick and industrial windows that actually opened. My first hire was Emma, my former assistant who'd been laid off the day after I was fired. Margot's way of erasing any witnesses. Open source biotechnology, Emma asked, reading through my business plan. You're going to give away the patents. Not give away, share. Every innovation transparent, every contributor credited, every breakthrough available to researchers worldwide. The opposite of everything cryonics represented. The model was radical, profits from implementation and customization, not from hoarding intellectual property. Academic institutions could use our research freely. Smaller companies could build on our foundations. We'd make money by being the best at applying what we openly shared, not by hiding it behind legal walls. Word spread through the biotech community like wildfire. Researchers who'd been stifled by corporate NDAs reached out. Graduate students with brilliant ideas, but no platform contacted me. Within 2 months, I had 42 applications for 8 positions. The venture capital response was mixed. Half thought I was destroying shareholder value. The other half saw the future. You're democratizing biotechnology, Marcus Chen from Andreessen Horowitz said during our first meeting. It's either brilliant or insane. In my experience, those aren't mutually exclusive, I replied. He laughed and wrote a check for $10 million. But the real victory came when Cryonics' top researchers started reaching out. These were people who'd watched Margot take credit for their work too, who'd seen their innovations locked behind profit margins while people who needed them suffered. Dr. James Rodriguez, who'd developed their cancer detection algorithm, was the first to jump ship. "I didn't get into science to make rich people richer," he said. "I got into it to save lives." Then came Dr. Sarah Kim, the machine learning specialist whose work Margot had presented at 12 conferences without ever mentioning Sarah's name. After her, Thomas Wright, the biochemist who'd been told his breakthrough wasn't commercially viable because it would help too many people too cheaply. Each defection hit Cryonics's stock price. MarketWatch ran a piece, "Brain Drain at Cryonics. Top talent flees to open source competitor." The investors who'd once worshipped Margot were now questioning everything. "You're poaching," Margot accused in a cease and desist letter her lawyers sent. "I'm not poaching anything," I responded through Patricia. "I'm simply offering talented people a place where their work will be credited, valued, and used to actually help humanity. If that's more appealing than your model, perhaps you should examine your model." The letter made its way to Reddit. The biotech community had a field day. 6 months after launching, Lattice Labs released its first product, an improved version of the biosensor Margot had rushed to market. Our version included all the safety protocols she'd removed, cost 60% less to manufacture, and came with complete documentation that any competent lab could replicate. We made it clear in every press release, this technology was originally developed by me at Cryonics, but had been compromised by executive interference. Now, it was restored to its intended form, safe, effective, and accessible. The NPSEC investigation concluded the same week. Cryonics was fined $18 million and forced to recall their entire biosensor line. The news coverage was brutal. Every article mentioned that the original developer, me, had left to found a competitor after being wrongfully terminated. "How does it feel?" Emma asked, watching Cryonics' stock price plummet on my office monitor. "Like justice," I said. "But we're not done yet." I pulled up our latest project proposals. 32 innovations in the pipeline, each one designed to be open, accessible, and impossible to corrupt. Each one a reminder that science belongs to humanity, not to boardrooms. "She must hate you," Emma observed. "Good," I replied, closing the stock ticker. "Hatred means she's still thinking about me, and every time she does, she'll remember that she had everything: my loyalty, my innovations, my dedication. And she threw it all away for her own ego." I looked around our warehouse lab, bustling with researchers who owned their work, who received credit for their discoveries, who knew their innovations would help people rather than stock prices. "Besides," I added, "I'm not interested in her hatred. I'm interested in making her irrelevant." 6 months later, the inevitable happened. The product Margot had stolen from me, the one she'd pushed to market without my safety protocols, failed catastrophically. Not in a way that hurt anyone, thank God, but in a way that destroyed trust. The biosensors gave false readings in humid conditions, a flaw I'd documented and fixed in my original design, a fix she'd removed to cut costs. The recall wasn't just national, it was global. Every unit sold. Every hospital that had integrated them. Every research facility that had trusted Cryonics' reputation. The lawsuits rolled in like tsunamis. The investigation revealed everything. Internal emails showed Margot had been warned by 3 different engineers about the humidity issue. She'd overruled them all. The same shortcuts she'd taken with my work, she'd taken with others. The same credit she'd stolen from me. She'd stolen from dozens. The Seattle Times ran a front-page exposé. The headline, "The Fall of Margot Vellner, How Ego Destroyed a Biotech Giant." They'd interviewed 17 former employees. Every single one had a story about stolen work, buried safety concerns, or wrongful termination. Cryonics lost 40% of its market value in 3 days. The board tried damage control, bringing in a new CEO, promising reforms. But trust is like virgin forest. Once clear-cut, it takes generations to regrow. The FDA investigation led to criminal charges. Margot was banned from serving as an officer in any public company for 10 years. Her lawyers negotiated it down from lifetime ban, but in biotech, 10 years might as well be forever. The day the verdict was announced, I was invited to speak at the Global Innovation Summit, the same conference where I'd sat in the third row watching Margot steal my thunder. This time, I stood on that stage myself, presenting Lattice Labs' latest breakthrough, a universal diagnostic platform that we'd made completely open source. Innovation dies in darkness, I told the audience of 2,000. It thrives in transparency. When we hoard knowledge, we don't protect value, we destroy it. When we steal credit, we don't build careers, we demolish trust. And when we sacrifice safety for profit, we don't create success. We engineer our own downfall. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, at the reception, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned to find Margot, looking diminished in a way that had nothing to do with her simple black dress or missing designer accessories. The armor was gone. Only the woman remained. "I suppose you're satisfied," she said, her voice hollow. "No," I replied honestly. Satisfaction would mean this had been worth it, but nothing makes those 2 years worth it. Not your downfall, not my success. Nothing. Then why? For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely confused. Why destroy everything? "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "I revealed what was already rotten. You destroyed it yourself the moment you decided my work was worth more than my dignity. The moment you called me at 2:41 a.m. while I was dying of fever and thought you'd won." She opened her mouth, closed it, then walked away. It was the last time I ever saw her. A week later, at a biotech conference in Boston, I gave my signature talk, the one that would become my TED presentation, my book introduction, my legacy. There's an old saying, revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. True revenge isn't served at all. It's earned. When someone steals from you, betrays you, attempts to erase you, the greatest revenge isn't their destruction. It's your resurrection. It's building something so magnificent from the ashes of their betrayal that their name becomes nothing more than a footnote in your success story. I paused, looking out at the audience of young scientists, brilliant minds who might one day face their own Margots. But here's the secret they don't tell you about revenge. The best revenge isn't just success, it's success that makes their failure inevitable. When you build with integrity what they built with deception, when you share freely what they hoarded greedily, when you create transparently what they corrupted secretly, you don't have to destroy them. They destroy themselves trying to compete with something they can never become, authentic. The auditorium erupted, but I wasn't finished. Margot Vellner called me at 2:41 a.m. to tell me I was nothing. Today, Lattice Labs has 300 employees, 400 open patents, and partnerships with 60 universities worldwide. We've made treatments accessible to millions who couldn't afford them before. We've enabled innovations that would have died in corporate vaults. And we've proven that science belongs to humanity, not to the highest bidder. I smiled, remembering that fever-soaked night when everything seemed lost. So yes, revenge is sweet, but building something better than what they took from you, that's revolutionary. The truth is, I never set out to destroy Margot. I set out to build something she could never steal, never corrupt, never claim, a legacy based on truth. Her destruction was just the shadow cast by my reconstruction. And that call at 2:41 a.m.? It wasn't my ending, it was my beginning. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced betrayal at work? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments below.